Marxism is atheistic. It believes no transcendent standard of morality even exists. Dr. Martin Luther King recognized this fact, once writing, "Since for the communists there is no divine government, no absolute moral order, there are no fixed, immutable principles. Consequently, almost anything, force, violence, murder, lying, is a justifiable means to the millennial end." Deception and outright lies, whenever necessary, have long been part and parcel of the Marxist project. The recent 1619 project from the New York Times, named after the year the first African slaves were brought to North America, is a perfect example. The project's website said that it aims to reframe the country's history, understanding 1619 as our true founding. Authored by New York Times reporter Nicole Hannah-Jones and now being adopted as curricula in some public school localities, this largely fabricated history makes this claim. Conveniently left out of our founding mythology is the fact that one of the primary reasons the colonists decided to declare their independence from Britain was because they wanted to protect the institution of slavery. But this claim has no basis in history. According to the New York Post, this false claim was immediately decried by scholars of all political stripes and from a variety of disciplines. And when President Trump recently spoke out against the 1619 Project and their discredited thesis, what did the New York Times and the leaders of the project do? Well, they simply lied, saying they never claimed 1619 was America's true founding, and quietly erased that claim from their website. You may be wondering how such a demonstrably flawed work could have won a Pulitzer Prize, and how the New York Times gets away with such duplicity. Well, it helps to have leftist media elites running interference for them, but more to the point, this is what Marxists always do. Lying and deception are justifiable to them if it advances their cause. If the central claims of the 1619 Project lack a historical basis, doesn't that invalidate the whole thing? Well, not for the radical left, because history was never the point. The point was the systematic demoralization of America, a long-time Marxist mission. All this is merely another step toward their goal of undermining America and grasping for the reins of power.